As the title of this video suggests, we are going to talk about the new main story update, Homecoming Wings. But before we dive in, I just want to clarify something for the newer players. Homecoming Wings is a main story update, not Caleb's personal branch. It's only in date, Falling for You, or a specific love interest branch, where she actually focuses on one specific love interest. The stories in Falling for You are separate from the main story, so keep that in mind. And as per usual, if you want to add anything, or if I missed out on anything important, feel free to have a discussion down in the comments, because I read every single comment and I love interacting with each and every single one of you. And this is going to be a really long video because there's so much to unpack. So I won't be covering Caleb's myths and anecdotes in this video. That's for the next video. So let's get into it. The opening of this main story is incredibly important. Our main character's dream about the explosion immediately sets the tone. The way the game describes it makes it clear that something deeper is going on, hinting at memories from her past or even past incarnations, similar to how she recalled her first meeting with Raphael when she was drowning, the promise that they made together, or her memories of Dragon Silas when she looked into his eyes. So this could be a hint for Caleb's second myth, or it could be something else entirely. But then something even stranger happens. She sees an artificial eye. This detail is huge because it ties back to all the surveillance and control themes we've seen in the main story. But what is it watching, and what is its purpose? This is a callback to all the eye imagery we've seen in the main story so far. The only direct reference we have is the phrase "BB is watching" and the Orwell's 1984 undertones. Could it have something to do with Eye of Ether that Silas mentioned in his anecdotes? Other than those two, the game hasn't explained what this eye actually is. And the game confirms something major. The ether core inside her has reached full power. We've already seen in Sealed in Dust that Ever was waiting for this exact moment, and long-awaited Revelry hinted at her ability to absorb other ether cores and powers. We still don't know what other things she can do with her power once her full potential is reached, and now it's finally happening. After this ominous foreshadow heavy scene, we're back at the Hunters Association headquarters, where our main character explains that the Hunters are now searching for a new ether core called the Spatium Core, a name that keeps coming up throughout the story, so pay attention to this. According to the game's description, this is an ether core capable of influencing space, even creating entirely new spaces. Though originally shattered, it has reassembled, drawing together by some gravitational pull. We also get a brief recap of how each love interest is dealing with Ever's mess, and how our main character is piecing everything together. She even uncovers that Ever was the true mastermind behind the explosion in Bloomshore District, which is her home. But we already know that the Raincoats were the ones who actually did this. If you want a more detailed overview on the things that Ever has done so far, check out my Ever video. With everything that's happened so far, it's clear that Ever is moving pieces behind the scenes, and their reach goes far beyond what we've seen before. That's when Skyhaven enters the picture. The Hunters Association have been tracking the movement of ether cores, and our main character has been connecting the dots. Ever is always one step ahead. A metaflux explosion occurs in Skyhaven, and something about it feels way too familiar. Last time she encountered something like this, it was in Bloomshore District, which is her home. If the same thing is happening in Skyhaven, that means Ever is behind it. So naturally, our main character requests permission to investigate, but the Farspace Fleet shuts her down immediately. Not the Hunters Association, but the fleet, who has control over Skyhaven. And their reason? Confidential information. But our main character does not take no for an answer. And she was like, alright then, no worries, I just won't go as a hunter. As our main character infiltrates Skyhaven by dressing up as one of the fleet's officer, she senses that something is off. But before she can dig deeper, she's called back to the Farspace Fleet HQ because of an intruder alert. And that's when we see him. And we get this iconic cutscene. We see Caleb, but not the warm, protective figure from her past, but the cold, unreadable Farspace Fleet colonel. He kills his adjutant by using his evol because his adjutant was going to betray him. And I love the sound design for his evol. It sounds so cool, and his evol itself is insane. I absolutely love this scene. Now that is how you make a comeback. Best reintroduction ever. Welcome back, Caleb. Okay, first of all, In the reaction video I posted a couple of weeks ago, I said I don't know how to feel about his English voice actor. Well, like I said in that video, I think I just need to get used to his voice, and I absolutely love him now. I think his voice actor did such a good job, but I don't know how to feel when he calls us Pipsqueak. But, you know, I love his voice. Okay, so back to the Farspace Fleet HQ, their command center. The fleet's attention turns to Joseph, a traitor accused of orchestrating the explosion in Skyhaven, and Caleb, acting as judge, lays out the official version of events. Joseph's paranoia led him to lock up his own family in the fleet's prison, where they later died. Wrecked with guilt, he turned against the fleet, launching an attack to make a statement. But Joseph has his own version of the truth. According to him, the fleet isn't just covering up the explosion, they're manipulating people. He claims the fleet planted something inside him, that his memories are not real, and that he's being controlled. Caleb, on the other hand, insists that Joseph's mind is broken due to long-term cosmic radiation exposure, that he was given Cybazin, a drug meant to stabilize his thoughts, but he overdosed and lost his grip on reality. Two sides of the story. So, who do we really believe here? At this point, it's easy to dismiss Joseph as just another unhinged traitor. But something about his claims feels too specific to ignore. And later we learn he was not lying. And Caleb was not lying too. They're both kind of telling the truth. But before Joseph can say anything else, Caleb silences him by summoning something that looks like a black hole. And Joseph just went poof. Okay, we knew that he has the gravity evol, but black holes? Has he been able to do that this whole time? Let's go back to the spatium core description. An ether core capable of influencing space, even creating entirely new spaces, drawn together by some gravitational pull. Gravity and black holes. Does Caleb has a spatium core inside of him? But there's no time to process all that because before our main character can even react, Caleb calls out another traitor in the command center, and before she knows it, she's caught in his evil. Thrown into an interrogation room, she finally gets a good look at him, and it's him. But this isn't a tearful, joyful reunion because right now they're being watched. And Caleb can't afford to drop the act. She was caught infiltrating the fleet disguised as an officer. If he doesn't handle this interrogation properly, they'll both be in danger. So he steps fully into his role, the cold, detached Farspace Fleet colonel. His entire demeanor, a stark contrast to the boy she once knew. In between the rigid formality, he finds a way to signal to her that they're being watched. She needs to play along, and thank God she understands. But then something he says raises a red flag. He references a metaflux surge in the N109 zone, the very one from the long-awaited revelry ending. And what's more unsettling, he's insinuating that the fleet knew she was there, that they had records of her movements, that they knew she wasn't punished when she returned from the N109 zone to the Hunters Association headquarters, which means they've been keeping tabs on her. The fleet has information on what happens inside the Hunters Association. These are two completely different organizations. Like, why would they have access to that? So how deep does their influence go? But just like that, the interrogation is over and we get this hugging scene. Just take a second to think about what our main character must be feeling. This is the person she grew up with, the person she spent her childhood with, the person she thought died in the explosion. And now he's standing right there in front of her, alive. And he's not just alive, he's the freaking colonel of the Farspace Fleet. How do you even begin to process that? After the interrogation, Caleb treats the marks on her wrists, and she does not waste time and fires off questions that have been burning in her mind. What happened after the explosion? And his answer? He does not remember. Says it felt like a dream. Then somehow when he woke up, he just knew how it was connected to the ether core. Excuse me? That's all he gives her. No details, no explanation, just I knew. You're being really sus right now. Then comes another big question. Why didn't he contact her all this time? And his response? If he didn't join the fleet, he would have been abandoned. And he says he couldn't contact her because he didn't want to put her through that pain again. And at that moment, our main character realizes that he has no intention of explaining anything. I swear, he's even worse than Xavier. I really hate these cryptic non-answers. But our main character lets it slide because honestly, she's just relieved that her family member is alive. And finally, she asked about their grandmother. And based on his answer, I don't think we're gonna get an iconic comeback from grandma. Like, she's gone. for real. And our main character, the so-called traitor who infiltrated the fleet, is now the colonel's new adjutant. Why? Because the colonel said so. Why are they acting like a bunch of people didn't just see that this girl was caught impersonating a fleet officer? Talk about abuse of power. I don't understand how they can just do that. But on their way to his house, our main character tells Caleb everything. The documents their grandmother left them, the ether core in her heart, and however has been pulling the strings all along. And he just calmly says, I understand. Let me deal with it for now. And little does our main character know, she's confiding in someone who already knows far more than he lets on. In his apartment, we get to witness a brief, quiet moment of normalcy between these two. They fall into an old rhythm. He asks what she wants for dinner. She casually wraps her arm around him. Little moments of domesticity like this, it shows the familiarity they have around each other. Because Caleb is the only love interest our main character already know. He was her source of comfort, her home. There's an ease and closeness between them that she does not share with any other love interest. But reality crashes back in, and when our main character brings up the explosion victims, the twins, Kevi and Mia, that brief moment of intimacy is gone. Kevi is still missing, and Mia is recovering. And Caleb responds with,
"The fleet will handle it. And even if you doubt them, can't you trust me?"
Like, really? Are you serious? You're gonna ask her that? After hiding your death and being sus as fuck? I don't think you deserve her trust. So even though he wants her to leave it alone, he still lets her investigate. And of course, he does this because he doesn't want her to get suspicious of him. And the next morning, our main character heads to Willow Medical Center to check on Mia, the other twin who is still recovering. But she couldn't see her because only her primary care physician can approve visitors. And just as she was trying to find a way in, guess who shows up? Zane comes to the rescue. He already knows why she's here, gets her access immediately. So Mia is the key to finding Kevi. But before our main character can get much out of her, they're interrupted by a fleet officer. Mia does, however, give our main character one important thing, the dog plushie, Lucia. Later, this plushie becomes the key to finding Kevi. And Zane later warns our main character that someone is behind Kevi's disappearance. And he drops another important information. The fleet is way too involved in the medical center now, more than before. And much later in the story, the game confirms that Mia is under surveillance. Okay, side note, why didn't our main character tell Zane that Caleb is still alive? Like, I get it. Pacing. I understand why Unfold decided not to, because that will make this update way longer and complicate things even further. I understand how they want to unfold the story slowly, but still, like, a little something would be nice, because they practically, all three of them grew up together. But anyway, our main character takes the plushie to the explosion site, hoping that Kevi will hear the recorded message inside this plushie. For a while, nothing happens, but then the space around her distorts, and just like that, reality itself tears open. And Kevi emerges, but something is wrong. His skin is crystallizing. We've seen this before. He looks similar to the Wanderers that we saw in the N109 zone. And our main character touches this crystals on his face. She felt pain in her arm, but then the crystals stopped growing. Keep that in mind. The growth stopped. Our main character's ether core has been a mystery since day one, but could this be another reason why Ever wants her? Kevi then hands her a spatium core fragment, the very same fragment the Hunters Association has been looking for. And Kevi told her that his parents, who were fleet members, left it for him, and it protected him during the explosion. They told him to hide and to use the fragment if he's in danger, and most importantly, to not trust anyone, not even the people dressed like them. His own parents told him not to trust the fleet. After hearing all this, our main character makes a decision. She's going to keep Kevi away from the Farspace Fleet, which in hindsight was absolutely the right move, because later we learned that the fleet didn't just rescue Kevi, they took him. And I'll get into that later, because right now I want to talk about Viper. In this main story update, we're introduced to a couple of very interesting new characters. One of them is Viper, a man who makes an entrance so unhinged, so dramatic, he might as well have walked straight out of an Otome villain casting call. By the way, I think he looks like an even hotter version of Ukyo from Amnesia. This guy isn't just some random menace. He's got a spatium core, and he uses it to cause some serious space warping chaos. He sets off an explosion and summons a Wanderer. The moment he appeared, I was like, yes, we are so back. This is the proper Otome experience. This is what Love and Deepspace has been missing, is an unhinged, theatrical, dramatic villain. But before things can spiral further, Caleb shows up, and it turns out that he and Caleb know each other. See? This is exactly why we can't trust Caleb. And yet here I am, spending all my diamonds and my hard-earned money to collect all his cards, but still, this man is too sus. Even though he's gorgeous, I still don't trust him. Anyway, Viper wastes no time dropping cryptic bombshells. He calls our main character the perfect vessel. If you watched my previous ever video, you know I've said that our main character is an experiment that Ever can't recreate yet, and I still stand by it. I think Ever placed that ether core in her heart. Then we get Caleb's protective rage mode and beats the absolute crap out of Viper. And honestly, I love it. And Viper says another important thing in the middle of getting his ass beat by Caleb, that it's not time to go after our main character yet, meaning that they're planning to. And he says, if you can't get the protocol fragment, you're done for. Now, I don't know if he's referring to our main character's ether core, but I can't help but remember what Silas said in Long-Awaited Revelry about our main character's family.
Family? The people closest to you might be the ones who want to kill you the most.
Yeah, I don't want to tell you how to think. I'm not even sure what he meant by this. So I'll leave that footage here so you can put the puzzle pieces together yourself and read between the lines and create your own conclusions. By the way, the night our main character was supposed to pick Kevi up, something scary kind of happened. Caleb casually suggests that she stay in. He plays the concerned card, saying that she's coming down with a cold and that Skyhaven's going into lockdown, so it's best that she stays in for her safety. And our main character, of course, isn't buying it. She knows that he's hiding something, and we know that he knows exactly what she's planning. So later when she tried to sneak out, he catches her and he drugged her. He gave her a cold medicine and asked her to drink it. She knocks out immediately and sleeps through the entire night. So when she wakes up later in the morning, announced on the news that Kevi has been found by the fleet. And here's the thing. I get that Caleb thinks he's protecting her. I really do. But this is some next level possessiveness. And I'm eating it up. I love the unhingedness. And before anyone starts hating on Caleb and says that, oh, he's toxic and he's da-da-da-da, okay. And I love the unhingedness and I'm not complaining. Like, even if he's not gonna turn out like Silas, like after his second myth, everyone immediately switches up because his previous incarnation was really tragic and it made his actions in Long-Awaited Revelry understandable. If that's not going to be the case with Caleb, I'm totally fine with it. And it's okay for you to not like him. You don't have to love every single love interest. Like, please do not come to an Otome game looking for moral lessons. Like, what are you doing? This is fiction. We're here to enjoy this story, not to write an ethics dissertation. If you really want to dissect moral lessons, an Otome game is probably not the best place to do that. Listen, I'm not saying that it's wrong to criticize characters or have discussions about them, but some people in the community are being so weird and rude about it. And for what? Like, it's not that deep. Chill out, it's just a game. Okay, I'm done ranting. Let's go back to the story. Later, Caleb gets a phone call informing him saying that the other twin, Mia, didn't make it. Our main character and Zane looked into the official records of Mia's death, which claimed she went into septic shock from her burns. Everything seems to be in check, but Zane isn't buying it. The records are too clean and too perfect. No one actually witnessed her death. Like, this just screams like a cover-up. And to make things worse, the bodies of Kevi and Mia's parents were conveniently found in a vessel that belonged to Joseph, the supposed traitor. And just like that, the fleet wraps everything up neatly. Kevi is placed with an adoptive family, Mia is dead, and any loose ends are tied up. Almost like this was planned from the very beginning. At Mia's funeral, Kevi is there, but he's not the same scared, crying child our main character rescued. His face is completely healed, and he's not showing any sadness. The fact that his sister is gone and he's not showing any emotions, it sets off alarms in our main character's head. Our main character immediately notices that something is wrong. 2 days ago, he was terrified, and now he's eerily calm. No grief, no sadness. Before our main character can put the pieces together herself, Viper shows up and drops a truth bomb. The fleet wouldn't have rescued Kevi unless he was valuable. And he said only a select few can handle an ether core's power without being devoured, which means Kevi is special. He survives something he shouldn't have. Sound familiar? I'm looking at you, MC. Viper then gives her an address, a signal jammer, and tells her to go see the truth for herself. The next day, our main character follows follows the lead and finds herself outside a seemingly normal villa, and then she sees Kevi. At first, it was just an innocent conversation. He talks about how the professor thinks he's talented, but then things take a sharp, horrifying turn. Kevi, a literal child, is holding an injured bird, musing about how if he breaks its wings, it'll stay with him forever. What the fuck? Ugh. Our main character then tried to talk to him about his sister, and then he started crying. And just when our main character tries to comfort him, the bracelet activates.
System error. Attempting a second reboot. The primary personality is attacking the control program. The chip rereading, inputting memory.
Kevi suddenly stops responding and his words become fragmented. And in an instant, his entire expression shifts. His crying stops, his face resets, and he greets her again like nothing happened, like his mind was wiped clean. Our main character barely has time to process the horror she just witnessed before she hears another voice approaching. She hides just in time to see him, the professor. And guess who he's talking to? Caleb. And then one of the biggest reveals of this update.
Was that girl, Mia, also part of your plan?
And the professor, completely unfazed, brushed it off because she wasn't important enough to keep alive. So that's it. Mia didn't die from septic shock. The fleet killed her. The real gut punch is Caleb's next words. The professor warns him that our main character is getting too close and she needs to stay out of it. And then he says she won't. And then,
if that day truly comes, and she discovers everything, I'll keep her hidden. She'll be in a place where no one can find her.
I know. And our main character is just standing there, realizing that Caleb isn't just aware of what the fleet is doing, he's actively a part of it. Mia was killed, Kevi was taken, the fleet is controlling them through the chip. Joseph, the traitor, was telling the truth. And Caleb, he is knee-deep in all of it. And our main character knows she can't trust him anymore. The next time she sees him, she gives him back his old necklace. But hidden inside is a stealth tracker. When she was giving him the necklace, he says something kind of important.
Back at the shelter, I remember you said your home was beyond the stars.
So this has to be a reference to the shelter they were at after the Chronorift catastrophe, the same event that destroyed Gaia Research Center. We know that our main character was experimented on there, and we know that she disappeared before being found again. As a child, when she said this to Caleb, was this her past self remembering her origins? Or maybe it could just be a random thing our main character said as a child, but either way, Caleb remembers, and we have this information now. Later that night, Caleb leaves on patrol, but not before locking our main character inside her room. And our main character, of course, is not about to let that slide. She blasts the lock and activates the tracker, and she went to follow him. She tracks him to what looks like an abandoned area in Skyhaven, except parts of it look new, just like the N109 zone. Metal debris that should be old but isn't. A forgotten place that's not so forgotten. And as she sneaks around, she nearly gets caught, but before she can react, someone pulls her into hiding. It's a girl, and she's covered in crystals, just like Kevi, just like the wanderers from the N109 zone. In the distance, our main character hears the fleet talking.
Isn't it weird how these monsters are getting more aggressive?
The contamination levels here are extremely high. They're practically indistinguishable from wanderers now. This batch of specimens is on the brink of transformation. Salvage value at 0%. Requesting confirmation to do the cleanup.
And suddenly, it all makes sense. This is what the cleanup really is. The fleet isn't saving anyone, they're wiping out survivors. These people that survived Ever's experiments that's about to turn into wanderers. And this girl, she's not an exception. She calls the professor her father, and she believes that he gave her a second chance. And then she loses control. Something inside her snaps, and suddenly she lunges at our main character, sensing her power. And it's not just her. More of them begin to gather, like they can sense the ether core inside our main character, like they're being drawn to her. Our main character is completely overwhelmed until Caleb shows up, and he takes care of them for her, and took our main character to his aircraft. When he was treating her wound back in his aircraft, he finally asked the question we've all been waiting for. What have you been doing behind my back? And instead of answering, he deflects. And I swear to God, our main character is really, I don't know if she's like blinded by her love or she's just straight up dumb, because at this point I would have absolutely gone feral. Because after this, he insists that until everything is resolved, he has to keep her safe, so he's locking her up in a special care unit, and she just fucking takes it. Like, when I saw this for the first time, I was so mad. If I was in that position, I'd go absolutely feral. And I know Caleb isn't actually planning to keep her locked up forever. He's just freaking out. I think seeing her get hurt triggered something in him. And then our main character confronts him about the cold medicine. And this absolute menace of a man just admits that he drugged her. So our main character does what any normal person would do. She throws a cup at him and it shattered. And does he get mad? No. Instead, he said,
"Did that help you calm down?"
I need help because I find that so attractive. I don't know why, but that was really hot. Maybe it's because he has the ability to handle her crazy. But then our main character wasn't about to let him lock her up. She knocks out a nurse and steals her uniform, pushes the cart full of medical supplies and casually walks out of there, in which she almost got caught. Almost. But just before she leaves, something catches her attention. A fleet officer takes 3 syringes from a box labeled Cybazin. Joseph the traitor mentioned this drug before. The label says this drug is used to combat emotional outbursts, enhance cognitive functions, and stabilize mental states. Only those with Turing chips may use this. Daily use is not advised. There it is. That's the name of the chip, the Turing chip. And suddenly everything clicks. The fleet isn't just using this chip to control Kevi and Joseph. They're using it on their own people, which means Caleb has one as well. And it makes our main character think that some of his actions and some of his decisions might not be entirely his own. And looking at the Kevi situation now, it makes even more sense. If the fleet is controlling its own people, then Kevi's parents were probably being controlled as well. Because what parent would willingly subject their own child to experimentation? Kevi's parents leaving him the Spatium Core, telling him to not trust them? They must have known something. Maybe they broke free from the chip's control for a brief moment. Maybe they realized what was happening, but by then it was already too late. And maybe the fleet knew that they broke free from the chip's control and they were scared that the parents are gonna, I don't know, tell people what was going on, and that's why they blew up that district. But anyway, when our main character was still trying to escape, she overhears something even more alarming.
The Fountain of Atei is about to enter its next phase. A banquet will be held in your honor before you leave.
The Fountain of Atei and a banquet in his honor. He must have done something major for the fleet to throw a banquet in his honor. Whatever it wasn't just a small accomplishment. He played a crucial role in their plans. But what exactly did he do? If you've been following the Love and Deepspace official post in Twitter, you'll remember that in July, the devs dropped this. The Fountain of Atei is an unknown and dangerous project. They appear to be planning to transplant a protocore into the human heart while implanting human consciousness into wanderers. The mastermind remains hidden. Transplanting a protocore into the human heart. My theory still stands. Our main character is an experiment that Ever is trying to recreate. By the way, you can see glimpses of these experiments if you play the new Abyssal Chaos. And just as our main character is processing all this, she gets caught again by Caleb. Now, we all know that our main character acts differently depending on which love interest she's with. And with Caleb, she switches up hard. Like, you thought he was a red flag. When she's with him, she's worse. In his myth, she's even more unhinged. But we'll get to that later in the next video. But for now, he takes her home and we get to see more unhinged Caleb. And he straight up makes it clear to our main character that he's always been like this and the chip did not change him, which I beg to differ. I think the chip did change him a little bit, but he's always been crazy. Like the possessiveness and the obsessiveness with our main character, he's always been like that. By the way, this scene, this absolutely tension-inducing, suffocating scene, this is the good stuff. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time watching this. Thank you, devs. Thank you so much for feeding us. It's amazing. I love it. Don't change him. Please don't change him. But with everything that's happening, it's pretty clear that whatever they're doing in Skyhaven, if they fail, it's going to turn into the next N109 zone. So Caleb lets our main character go in 3 days as he promised. After he's done tying up loose ends, he sends her back to Lincoln and they said their goodbyes. But he pulls out the final dirty, unfair move. The fucking forgiveness coupon. The one that our main character gave him when they were kids. This is dirty. That's unfair. Like, how is she supposed to stay mad at him after this? How? And we know that she's going to tolerate him. She's gonna forgive him because she says that I don't want to lose him a second time. And even though she is going back to Lincoln, all this is far from over. So when they said goodbye to each other, Caleb says that he's leaving with the fleet, right? To go back to the deep space tunnel, right? That's what he said? Guess what? He lied again. In the final chapter of this main story update, the game drops gives us some huge reveals. Researchers in Skyhaven are preparing to announce the biggest breakthrough of the century. Just to jog your memory a little bit, there is a broken Otome saying something similar to this in the N109 zone. That's why I said that whatever they're doing in Skyhaven, if it fails, it's gonna turn into the next N109 zone, a desolate place. And then Caleb enters a restricted elevator. It takes him to a floor that does not exist, that can only be accessed with special clearance. And then we see Viper talking about how he visited the N109 zone because he wants information on Onychines. Maybe they want info on Silas? And then he drops this line.
We practically spoiled Ever, and those old people in the fleet. We're like their personal hitmen.
So it's confirmed. The fleet isn't just working with Ever, they're a tool of Ever. The fleet has been compromised. They've been used to wipe out evidence, cover up explosions, and eliminate people who know too much. And a tool for experimentation, maybe? Because they're modifying people with the Turing chip. So I want to make a small connection here. We already know from Sealed in Dust anecdote that the Raincoats, the people who were doing dirty work for Ever, were the ones who bombed Bloomshore District, the one in Lincoln, our main character's house. So are these people, I mean Viper, Caleb, and these two, are they the Raincoats? Or are they just another different group who works for Ever? And now we're looking at an even bigger question. How long has Ever been pulling the strings inside the fleet? Was the corruption always there, or did Ever infiltrate them later? So Caleb then goes to see the professor, and this is where everything comes together. The professor brings up Josephine, our main character's grandmother, and finally confirms something huge. The Gaia Research Center, the facility responsible for our main character's experimentation, was destroyed during the Chronorift catastrophe, and the N109 zone took over after that. So the N109 zone wasn't just some random desolate place, it was built on the remains of whatever Gaia was working on. So this kind of explains why Onychines, Silas, is really good at modifying protocores. If Onychines has access to Gaia Research Center's old data and technology, then it makes sense why they're so good at it. And let's not forget Philip, the owner of Odd Workshop. He was a part of Josephine's old team and is technically under Silas's protection. That connection alone suggests that Onychines has been gathering and preserving knowledge from Gaia's experiments, which would explain why Silas knows so much about protocores. So does that mean he has records and data of our main character's experiments while she was still being experimented in Gaia Research Center? Okay, now I'm even more curious about how much he knows. And then Caleb says something really important here, that her powers have not been activated yet. So what can she do with her powers? What happens if it's activated? And then after that, Caleb's just casually called himself a weapon forever. And the text gives us this chilling description about the price Caleb had to pay to be brought back to life, and that the human body is too fragile through the neural network numbing everything, taking control of everything until they completely replace him. So that means that Caleb is going to lose his humanity. Bit by bit, they're stripping away his humanity, turning him into a perfect, obedient machine. And then right before the chapter ends, we get this poem. What the fuck does that mean? It's very eerie and poetic, and it feels way too specific to just be some random lore fluff. It sounds like obviously something tied to immortality, resurrection, or maybe even the manipulation of time itself. Shattered stars and crystalline pools immediately makes me think of ether cores, especially the spatium core, which we already know can distort space and create new realities, and then do not drink from it. That just screams warning to me. But then the poem shifts. Only then can you drink deep of these waters. Like there's a specific condition that needs to be met first. And that last part, spare me from the loneliness of eternal rest. Obviously, again, it's about immortality. Okay, so they're transferring human consciousness into wanderers. But why? Are they trying to create an army? What's the end game here? Is this about achieving something beyond mortality, or is it just another way to control and weaponize people? And this Fountain of Atei is clearly Ever's ultimate project, and it's tied to everything. The Turing chip, the protocore, the N109 zone experiments, and our main character's powers, and also Caleb's modifications. Oh, this update gave us so much. It answered long-standing mysteries and tied together plot threads we've been speculating about for ages, and then immediately hits us with even more questions. But now I can't stop thinking about what's gonna happen next. How far does Ever's influence stretch into the fleet? Do they also have influence over the Hunters Association? Is the professor the mastermind behind the Fountain of Atei? And most importantly, how long has Caleb really been entangled in all of this? Because he is way too deep in this mess for it to be just recent. And then there's this guy. So we don't know if he's a potential sixth love interest or maybe a major villain, because the game is being way too descriptive about what he's supposed to look like for him to be just a nobody. There's also this girl. I'm so curious about who they are and how they're going to tie into the main plot. There's so much we still don't know, but if the next update is anything like this one, it's going to be absolutely insane. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching this video. Caleb's video will be next, so please stay tuned, Caleb Girlies. And please leave a like if you want, and consider subscribing if you enjoy my content. And that is the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!